last month, you might have seen Elon Musk's leaked email to his company where he said that he has this super bad feeling about the economy and also how he thinks that Tesla needs to cut about 10% of their employees. Now, a lot of people working at Tesla felt like it wouldn't be them, but of course, for some of them it was. Then we saw this article written by one of the terminated employees who worked as a recruiter for their autopilot group. Now you can tell by the title alone that he definitely wasn't happy about what happened, and we even made this quick TikTok video showing how he says that it ended up happening to him. And even though layoffs are still pretty much just in the tech and now also the crypto industry right now, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those sectors in a second, what was really interesting about what happened to this employee is that it's pretty much the exact experience that people would have working at any larger corporate organization. Now maybe your manager would hopefully deliver the news more nicely and just not read off a script like apparently what happened in this case.
You have already been fired. I have already terminated your employment. You are at least 40 seconds fired, so please.
This will be your last week of employment at this company.
But the general process of hearing the news that layoffs might be coming, then being assured that it's not going to impact you, you'll be fine, then seeing that scary random meeting invite pop up on your calendar for 30 minutes from now, and then finally hearing the news from your boss and probably HR, and then being kicked off your company laptop and email within minutes. That unfortunate experience is definitely pretty much the same for a lot of people. And if hearing that entire process is either giving you really upsetting flashbacks because this has happened to you in the past, or if it's something that you hope to never experience yourself, it's probably a good time to talk about how to mentally and financially prepare for potential layoffs. And also to talk about how likely it is that layoffs will either be sticking around or if they'll be slowing back down. So after you give this video a big like down below, because it really helps with the channel and we appreciate it a lot, then we'll get into it.
Okay, so let's get a few facts out like right away here. So unemployment numbers overall still aren't looking that bad. The latest numbers in Canada had the rate falling slightly to 5.1% in May, and in the US it held steady at 3.6%, and we'll have to see how that ends up changing in June, and if we see any movement in the other direction. But for now, what that means is that even though layoffs are happening, they aren't impacting the mass population just yet. Now, something that we've been seeing more of over the past few weeks are layoffs in the crypto space. So listen, it's not just big tech. It started with Gemini cutting 10% of their workforce, then Crypto.com saying that they're laying off 5% of their workforce, then BlockFi reducing 20% of their headcount, and then finally Coinbase getting rid of 18% of their employees. These are some really, really big cuts. Now, even the Coinbase CEO referred to what's been going on lately as the crypto winter. And he said that he thinks that it could last for an extended period of time, or, whatever that basically means. Now, on top of tech and crypto, we read this one CNBC article that said that they expect to see layoffs on Wall Street as well. Now, what's interesting is that if you look at the numbers, a lot of investment banks like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, they all added thousands of positions since the beginning of the pandemic. Now, what's interesting is that they both have around 15% more employees than what they had, let's say, 2.5 years ago. Now, Morgan Stanley as well has over 25% more employees, but the problem here is that they're all predicting that their revenues are actually going to be dropping as we enter deeper, or we go deeper into that recession territory. And now, in order to cut costs to account for these lower revenues that they're projecting, naturally they're going to be letting people go, right? Like, that only makes sense.
What's interesting is that a lot of people do seem to be saying that there's not going to be widespread layoffs, and they're trying to reassure everyone that they're only going to happen in super isolated industries, which we've seen is true right now if we look at the low unemployment rate and also the fact that there are still new jobs being added. Basically what this means is that there's still more jobs being created right now. But we also know that if a recession is coming, then the unemployment rate is going to be a lagging indicator. Now this means that we usually don't see a spike in unemployment until we already know that we're in a recession. Now we actually talked in a past video about how both the yield curve and the unemployment rate are two of the most accurate predictors of a recession coming up. But like I just said, the unemployment rate is super accurate, meaning that when unemployment rises quickly, a recession is definitely correlated to that. But we don't have a lot of time to prepare for the unemployment rate to shoot up. It just starts to happen. Just look at this chart of the unemployment rate during March 2020 specifically, which was the last very short recession that we had. Now in the US, it went from 3.5% at the beginning of March all the way up to 14.7% in April, which is a massive upward swing in just 1 month. Now because that recession was so short, the unemployment rate started to go back down pretty much right away. But let's look at the 2008 recession to see a much more gradual progression. Now here you can see that the unemployment rate continued to rise during the entire recession, which was about 1.5 years long. And then it took until about 2016, or 7 years later, to go back to the same level that it was before the recession. So even though unemployment isn't up right now and it's actually holding pretty steady, if a recession does hit, then it's historically extremely likely that unemployment would start to really quickly rise. And then depending on the length of the recession, it would then go slowly back down, or at least more slowly than it went up. But are we even gonna see a recession right now? Good question. Let's talk about the newest updates on that front.
So we've obviously been talking a lot about recessions on the channel recently, and once again, we're not alone. literally everyone's talking about how one could, keyword obviously being could, be coming up.
Even if there isn't a recession,
Yeah, we could have a recession.
The economy is slowing.
Are you concerned about a recession?
The Fed has thrown us into a technical recession.
Now, here's the thing though. No one actually knows when exactly that's gonna happen or when that's gonna come, but there are a lot of indicators at literally anywhere from high inflation rates to rapidly increasing interest rates, and there's a lot more. Now, we talked about one of the most important potential signs a few weeks ago when we mentioned how the US GDP shrunk for the first quarter of 2022. And once again, the official definition of a recession includes there being 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. So to translate, that basically signaled us being halfway there. Now in Canada, we saw a very small positive growth, but last month's data actually showed it contracting here as well. So obviously we're gonna keep an eye out on the quarter to quarter numbers. Another important point that I wanted to mention here is that Canada's GDP is also highly tied to real estate, which obviously if you know, you know, but that's a topic for another day. Anyways, let's get back to US GDP for just a second. Here's the latest update. So according to the Atlanta Fed's GDP tracker, the US GDP is on track to be negative again for the second quarter of the year. Now, as of right now, they have it running at a negative 2.1%. And if that happens when they release the data in a couple weeks, then the US will technically, once again, be in a recession. Now, this is just one tracker, obviously, and again, it's not the official data just yet, but if everything continues in the path that, once again, we're expecting it to, then a recession would be here very soon, and we could even be in one right now. Now, also, we need to mention that technically, right, 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth doesn't automatically mean that it's a recession. But since World War II, there really hasn't been a time where those two things didn't go together. Yeah, so it's pretty likely. But for now, what we do know is that the unemployment rate isn't up just yet, but layoffs have obviously started happening in a few more different industries, slowly increasing in terms of the numbers of people being let go or having their offers rescinded. But once again, what can you do to prepare if this does end up happening to you?
Now's actually a really interesting time in the job market, because even though everything that Den just said is true, we recently, like as recently as a few months ago, we're still in what was being called the Great Resignation, where a lot of people were quitting their jobs either to job hop, to start their own business, or to switch career paths. And you guys heard us talk a lot about this on the channel too. And people are even doing things like working 2 jobs at the same time or promoting anti-work. Now, seeing a switch from a true employees market where it felt like you could kind of do anything you wanted to when it came to your career, to now being at least a little bit afraid of getting laid off is a huge swing to go through all at once. And it also means that we're in a bit of a gray area where in some areas people are still job hopping. And we do know that typically people see higher salary increases from switching companies than they would from actually getting a raise or a promotion in their current job. But then in other industries, layoffs are in full force. So what should you be doing? It's gonna be really industry specific, seniority specific, and just role specific in general. Now, are we saying to stop switching jobs right now? No. But think about if it makes sense for the type of job that you have. Sometimes the most recent hires are actually the first to go when layoffs hit. So you do wanna have that as a consideration right now. And maybe it's even something that you could actually ask about if you're going through an interview process at a new company right now. And also, if you recently switched jobs already and you feel like you might not be in the most secure position, then do what you can control for yourself. Have an emergency fund that can cover your bills for at least 6 months in case you do lose your job. Update your resume, make sure you're creating professional connections if you end up needing to job search again. And also, if you have the ability to have multiple income streams, then that's always a great way to have a little bit of extra security too. Now, overall, times like this are definitely scary. Everyone talks about recessions and higher prices and potential layoffs with a lot of fear. And it can be scary if you lose your job or if you're having a hard time affording a day-to-day life. But if you have the knowledge of what's going on and why, it really helps to take away some of that fear. Now, you might still feel annoyed, and we totally get that, but again, you're gonna go through multiple recessions, multiple market downturns, and multiple spikes in employment in your life, all of it. And if you can be in a good place with your finances, from paying off your debt to having an emergency fund and consistently investing in passive long-term options, then you're gonna be okay.
All right, guys, that's a wrap on this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and yeah, if you did, make sure you like down below. You probably should have already, right, if you're at this point in the video, but yeah, make sure you like the video down below. It really does help out the channel a ton. Make sure you subscribe right there in the corner, and yeah, if you want to check out some more videos on how to build an emergency fund and how to start investing, make sure you check out these 2 videos next door. We will be back. You know the vibes. Let's go.